everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today's subject is probably one of the hardest, most personal subjects I've ever had to discuss here before, and that would be ghosting. I've already tried to talk about this once and I ended up getting really emotional, and I decided it was better to just shelve that one and revisit it when maybe I could talk about it without crying so much. So here we are, take 2 of talking about ghosting. So if you don't know what ghosting is, it is when someone chooses to no longer respond to forms of contact, whether that be email or direct messages or text messages, without any provocation or warning. So it's not when somebody tells you, please don't call me again, or don't text me again, or I need some space. There's no rhyme or reason to why it happens. It's just all of a sudden, out of the blue, someone chooses to no longer respond to your contact. Literally, the last words that you say before you get ghosted could be, I love you, or can't wait to see you again. And because it's something that happens without any warning at all, it can be very jarring and very painful. And I suppose I should probably start with my own personal relationship with ghosting. And this is really strange for me because I try not to talk about super personal stuff on my channel. I know that might seem weird because of the nature of what I discuss, but for the most part, I try to leave my relationships and my partners out of the equation. And I guess I'll just say that I've been ghosted before, and it was incredibly painful. It was probably the most painful thing I've experienced in the last half a decade in terms of breakups. And I've had some painful breakups. I have had some terrible partners after a breakup has happened in terms of how they behaved afterwards. And ghosting was probably the worst of all of them that I've gone through. At the same time though, and I'm really not proud to admit this, I have also been the ghoster. It is really, really shameful for me to say that out loud, but I have also ghosted people before. It's something that happened when I wasn't really emotionally prepared for adult relationships. I didn't know I was ghosting people. We didn't really have a word for it, but I was so conflict averse that my solution to dealing with difficult moments in relationships was to just go completely, hands off the wheels, feet off the gas pedal, and just go, okay, I can't handle this. I'm not going to talk to this person anymore. It's like abandoning a house because one room gets too messy. And I understand now that behavior was really wrong and not at all an appropriate way to handle an adult relationship, but I didn't have other skills at the time, so that was just what I did. And especially after going through ghosting myself, it's never something I would want to do to another person because of how painful it is. And I cannot emphasize how horrible it is to go through ghosting, because if you're anything like me, your mind starts to race and you start thinking, okay, what did I do to deserve this? What did I say to this person to make this happen? And it's so tempting to go through every message that you sent to that person and figure out, okay, what did I do to make this happen? How can I fix this? What can I say to make this go away? And I think the first step to dealing with ghosting is to understand that it's not happening necessarily because of something you did or said. It is entirely on the other person for not having the decency or the emotional ability to have that hard conversation. Because if it is that the relationship is ending, they should be able to tell you, hey, I don't think this is working out, or hey, I don't think this was going in a direction that I expected it to. I'm not comfortable with this. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Whatever it is, they should be able to say it instead of leaving you in the dark to wonder what happened and not knowing how to pick up the pieces. So number 1 is just understanding that ghosting is not because of you. It's on the other person for not having the ability to have the hard conversations that go with having an adult relationship. And definitely the stereotype around ghosting, and when it's probably most common, is during online relationships during, say, the first 3 to 6 months or so, because it's a lot easier to suddenly stop talking to someone when you've never seen each other before, when you don't even live in the same town, when you don't have any mutual friends, and it becomes a lot harder to do that same thing when you are more enmeshed with each other. But it doesn't mean that it's not painful, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen to other types of relationships as well. You can be ghosted when you've dated somebody for 3 years. You can be ghosted when you're engaged. And even if it does happen, 4 weeks into an online relationship, it can still really, really hurt. And once you've gone through that first step of understanding that it's not really about you, the next thing I would advise is to lean on your support network. That was so critical for me when I was going through this. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have my support network, because it was so helpful to be able to tell my friends what happened and to have them essentially reality check what I was going through and to remind me that it wasn't my fault that this happened, that it was inappropriate for a partner that I trusted to suddenly abandon me. And what can make ghosting even worse is oftentimes when we have a really deep, intimate connection with somebody, they can quickly become our sole resource for our emotional and social needs. They're the ones we talk to all the time and call all the time, to the point where our other connections and friendships start to wither off and die, essentially. And so if you have maybe been neglecting your friendships and your other connections because of someone in your life that you're really, really emotionally connected to, I would advise taking some time to maintain those connections, because at the end of the day, your best friends are going to be the ones that are there for you when things are the hardest. And I'm not trying to say with that like because you're so emotionally close with someone, they're going to abandon you and you need to have an escape plan for when that happens. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that in general, it is usually beneficial for our overall emotional and mental health to have additional connections outside of one sole partner that takes up all of our time and through whom we get all of our emotional needs met. So just something to think about there. And even if you don't have a wide support network with a lot of friends or family members, that doesn't mean you don't have access to support during tough times. If you have a therapist, they can be so helpful. And so even if you don't have a lot of friends that understand you, maybe having a therapist that can help talk you through these times can be a way of starting that healing process and reality checking what actually happened. If you don't have a therapist, if you can't afford one, there are great apps available, or even online or telephone call therapy for pretty cheap. I personally found it helpful to use an app called Wysa, which is WYSA, which has like a cute little owl AI, which is essentially trained to help talk you through tough situations, whether that be dealing with anxiety or depression or relationship issues. It can help you with a lot of different things, whether that just be typing out what happened or reframing your thoughts or calming down from an anxiety issue or just telling you a funny joke to help make your day a little bit better. I personally found it to be great, especially when it was just something sort of small and it was like 3 a.m. and I woke up and I was like, okay, I'm dealing with this still. I don't want to wake up my partner. Oh no, I'll talk to this little owl on my phone. And that was great. And it can seem kind of weird to just talk to a robot, but it really can help you feel better. And I think there's also an option as well where you can add in a therapist if you want that additional support. I've never tried that, but I know from reviews I've read that some people do really like having that feature. Now, another thing when it comes to healing from ghosting is that it can be really, really tempting to keep reaching out to the person that ghosted you. And I know that there is that draw to want to have closure, to just know why it happened. But ultimately, you are not going to get closure from the person that ghosted you because they ghosted you. They're out of your life. That closure is going to come from within. And so you need to start the process of withdrawing from that connection to start to remove and heal yourself from where that connection has been cut off. There's a great website. If I can find it, I'll put it on the screen for you all. And you can literally type out the words you wish you could say to that person on your desktop, on your phone, and see the words literally fade and fall away off the screen into beautiful stars. And I have used that for years, and I've always found it to be really helpful when I really, really want to reach out to somebody, but I know that I can't, and I know the words I want to say would maybe even be hurtful or would not help the situation. And I would advise using that. You can also, for example, keep a Google Doc where you just type out all of your thoughts and then you delete it afterwards, or send an email to yourself with the things you wish you could tell that person. Do something to kind of help yourself let go of those thoughts, but not necessarily contact that person with all of those thoughts, because again, they're not going to respond to you. They're not going to be there. And so you just really need to be able to start that process of letting go of what you wish you could say to that person while resisting the urge to reach out. I personally also found it helpful to remove my typical forms of contact that I use with that person from my phone. So I removed apps, I blocked them on other things where they hadn't blocked me from, and it just kind of helped start the process of closing down and acknowledging that the person was no longer going to be part of my life. And even if you are doing all of this and you're removing the urge to contact and you're leaning on your support network, it can still be really, really, really painful. And I basically want to tell you that it's okay to be hurt by this. It's okay to be grieving the loss of that connection. And I really think it is best to act as though the relationship is ended, even if they haven't said anything, because if you try to hold on to that little nugget of like, oh, well, what if they contact me? Oh, well, what if they want to talk again? What if this is just a fluke, right? That is going to prevent you from fully being able to get better and get over this particular relationship connection, because ultimately, I think it is worth considering if this person is willing to consciously hurt you so badly. Should you really try and maintain a relationship even if they do reach out? And I think you'll recognize with time that it is probably better to not have a relationship with somebody that consciously chooses to hurt you in this way and has no remorse about it. So I would act as though the relationship is ending, and because of that, it can be quite painful. And the analogy that I think of is when you're going through a typical breakup, right? And you have that painful but mutual understanding that the relationship is over. It's kind of like going through surgery, right? You get the pain meds, you get stitched up, but it still hurts and it still sucks. But because you have, a team of nurses taking care of you, you understand what happened, the doctor can tell you everything that happened during the surgery, you're probably going to recover all right, and then maybe it takes, a couple days or a week before you can get back on your feet again. With ghosting, it's less like having surgery and more like being drugged through barbed wire. You're just like, what the fuck? How did I even end up in barbed wire? I don't know how deep this goes. I don't even really understand how much I'm bleeding or why this happens. And because of how traumatic that injury is, it can take a lot longer to recover from. And so when something like this happens, I think the first step you have to do is recognize that the healing process is going to take however long it takes. Some people bounce back from breakups no matter how difficult they are in like 2 days and they're fine. Other people more in that relationship for days, weeks, months, or longer. And I think it just is something where you have to be kind with yourself and allow yourself to take as much time as you need to grieve, because not having that closure, not really knowing what that person wants or why they did what they did, it messes with that grieving process and it can make it take so much longer. So just be kind to yourself. Just remind yourself that you are a good person. You are worthy of love and affection. You are not bad and unlovable. It is that other person's own fault for doing what they're doing, not on you because you're bad or a monster or unlovable or something else, whatever it is you happen to be thinking at that moment. And just give yourself kindness first. And it can be so hard to give ourselves kindness first. And I'm not saying that it will be an easy process to adopt that mentality of being kind to yourself first, but it is worth it. And I think if you can take some time to sit with yourself as often as you need to remind yourself that you are good and okay and worthy of love, and this is where I start to get teary-eyed because this is really emotional for me, is going to be so good for you, not only in this situation, but carrying forward into the rest of your life. And I think what I really want to end on here is to talk a little bit about how BDSM complicates the ghosting process. So if you are just clicking on this video because it said ghosting and you don't know who the hell I am, hi, I'm Evie Lupine. I'm a BDSM educator, and so I'm going to take a couple minutes here to explain how BDSM makes this even harder. Because when you are getting into a power exchange relationship especially, and you trust someone that deeply, it can feel even more like your insides are getting ripped out. To have somebody essentially betray your trust in them, to go from, committing to somebody in a power exchange relationship to them suddenly not caring about you at all. And if you have given up a lot of personal information about yourself, if you have given up a lot of private thoughts about who you are that you never share with anybody else, when you have that degree of vulnerability, it makes it so much more painful to have that relationship removed because you become so invested in it. And if you've done BDSM play with this person, like let's say, for example, you've done some humiliation and degradation play, right? And suddenly after a scene, somebody ghosts you. How those things normally work is, though you are playing with things that are potentially hurtful, right? You're having somebody call you awful names or tell you that you're worthless or trash or whatever else. You understand that the person doesn't really think that you are those things. It's just for play. It's just for fun. It's because you both find it enjoyable. But when somebody ghosts you, when you've done things like that, there's a little worm that kind of creeps into your head and is like, oh, shit. I mean, this person abandoned me. So clearly, I must actually be worthless. I must actually be trash. Because if I was a worthwhile person, if I was a good submissive, they wouldn't just leave me like this. And I honestly think that if you are in a BDSM relationship, it is even more terrible to ghost someone, because I think it's the duty of the dominant, no matter how hard the relationship is, no matter how awful it would be to break up, to at least have that conversation and have that closure. Because when we are playing so deeply in emotions like this, playing so deeply in these very vulnerable parts of ourselves, if you do not take the requisite time to end a relationship appropriately, you can leave somebody with lasting psychological damage. And I think a lot of us avoid having conversations about ending kink relationships because it kind of puts a damper on the mood, right? You're finally negotiating with this person for this amazing relationship, and you want to bring up what to do when we break up? Well, let's not think about it. That's not going to happen. We're so compatible, right? But I do think it is something that we should include in our negotiations to make sure that we have some tools available to us in the relationship to know what to do. And if you are getting into a DS relationship with someone, I hope they are the kind of person that you can trust enough to listen to things you put in a contract or into a negotiation framework where you talk about how to end the relationship appropriately, rather than just like leaving you with a gaping wound on your side and going, good luck, deal with that on your own, I'm going over here instead. And honestly, this video's already gone on for long enough, and I could do an entire separate video where I talk about how to develop an ethical way to break up with a partner in a BDSM relationship and how to end a relationship safely that's hopefully not going to cause so much psychic damage. So I will leave that subject on the table for a different discussion. Now, one last thing I want to make sure to mention here before I wrap up this video is that when I am talking about ghosting, I am not talking about going no contact. Going no contact is essentially when you have no other options to leave the relationship safely. Because my fear with this is maybe by talking about ghosting, we're adding another tool to the abuser's bag to guilt and manipulate their abuse victims by basically allowing them to say, if they're able to contact their victims again, you ghosted me, you abandoned me. When that's not what happened, you didn't ghost them, it was the only safe alternative you had to leave the relationship. So if you are dealing with a narcissist, if you are dealing with an abuse situation, do not worry about ghosting your abuser. You are taking your own health and safety first, as you should. And on that happy note, that's all I really have time for today because I can see that my battery on my camera is about to die. So if you do have any other questions for me in terms of how to end a BDSM relationship in a healthy way, how to heal from this more, you can leave your own comments, questions, and stories down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this, if you want to see more from me, please do subscribe and make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related subjects. If you really want to support my channel, the best way you can do that is through Patreon. A link to that is down in the description box below. If you already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.